Hey everybody that's watching. This is Adam Goosby, one of your fellow classmates, doing my presentation on the issue that's facing rural schools. Um, the issue that I chose here is the exclusionary discipline gap that is in place, or the disproportional gap rather, that's in place due to exclusionary discipline, especially when dealing with minority students in a rural setting. I was surprised after reading the article on this that it truly does, in fact, apply to my school as well, which is why I chose it as a topic. And I'm kind of approaching this presentation from a direction of it being a true case study and something that I could present to my faculty and actually intend to do so. Our teachers come back on Friday, and we're going to use this kind of as the foundation for our behavior PLCs moving forward. Um, so, work screen. The vision and objective of this particular case study, number one, is to eliminate racial disproportionality in discipline, particular with exclusionary practices, so things such as suspensions or in-school detention or even expulsion in extreme cases, and create a just and inclusive school culture that is representative of all demographics that are in the building. So our data and our school in particular, minority students of multiple racial ethnicities make up 51% of our school population. The last school year, 24-25, those students actually made up 75% of the exclusionary discipline consequences that were provided by office administration, which was shocking to me once I actually looked at those numbers. And apparently, according to the research article on this, that is not an uncommon practice. Um, the definition that I'm using going forward for exclusionary discipline is when students are removed from the classroom as a consequence for an office referral. And this is not necessarily them coming in and talking to an administrator or spending 10 or 15 minutes to cool down. This is removing them from the classroom as a disciplinary consequence. So we're looking at 1 day or longer removing them due to a behavior. One of the ways that we are going to change this culture is to look at our discipline through a data-driven analysis. We're actually going to take our discipline numbers that come from PowerSchool on the administrator side of things. We also collect all of our discipline referrals in a Google Sheet, and it's going to make the collecting of that data a lot easier because we're going to be able to identify not only the students, but the grade level, the teacher that's referring, the date, the time, all of those factors go into play when we're looking at this data. And we're going to look at what is the most common behavior? What time is it happening so that we can then equip the classroom teachers with more tools, more tactics, ways that they can then change their method of intervention in the classroom to prevent a behavior from turning into an office referral, which then by nature is going to decrease the number of exclusionary discipline situations. The second portion of our data-driven analysis is to actually provide teachers with scenario-based reflections. So what we kind of did this a little bit last year, not knowing that it was targeting this exact problem in rural education. But we did provide teachers with scenarios that actually occurred on the school campus. And it was in that scenario driven situation that they were able to see, okay, this is the practice that took place in the classroom with our actual students. And then we were able to then kind of brainstorm ideas off of one another that allowed us to better equip the teachers with ways to intervene in the classroom setting and not turn it into an office referral. The second aspect of this plan to change this problem within our school is the strategic utilization of our discipline policy. Obviously, we can't just go out and change a district code of conduct. So we're going to have to use what we currently have. We are one of two schools that are in the district that have a majority minority student population. But what we are going to do is require students to kind of really focus more on um, reflective practices and restorative practices. So when a student comes to the office and receives a referral, the first thing we're going to do before we even begin to discipline is have the student write a consequential reflection. So it's a couple of questions. What behavior did you do that got you down here? Um, why did it happen? What are we doing going forward? What do you think the consequence of this behavior is? And making the students think about that, you can kind of begin to see if there's going to be some remorse that's taking place within the situation. Also, we're going to limit those exclusionary practices to only major and severe violations. Our code of conduct actually has four levels of discipline. We have what we call level one, or minor infractions. We have level two, or intermediate. Then we have level three, which are our majors. Those are things like fighting or the use or possession of a vapor device, um, which is part of a new Alabama law. So things that are major situations, those are those level threes. Those we could possibly apply an exclusionary practice to. And also you have the severe violations. So these are things like a terroristic threat or bringing a weapon to school or things that really require the student to be removed from campus. The fourth portion of our strategic utilization is to partner with a local agency that is called the Evelyn Moon Crisis Center. They do have several counselors that work for that particular nonprofit agency, and we partner with them already to intervene with particular and individual student situations. We did just recently discover that they are offering services to our school that they will come in and do a trauma-informed response training for our teachers, which will again equip them with more tools to potentially handle these disciplinary situations in the classroom and again reduce the number of office referrals, which in turn is going to reduce the number of exclusionary practices. The third thing is our monthly behavior PLCs. We did a couple of these in the previous school years, but we've never made it a monthly intentional meeting. So our agenda for each of these meetings is going to be essentially the same. We are going to initially at the beginning of the school year elect a grade level representation. So it could be a grade level chair, it could be someone that the grade level just picks and assumes is going to be the best possible scenario to express their concerns in terms of discipline to our leadership team. We also are going to spend time in those agendas focusing on brainstorming approaches, as I mentioned previously, with those actual scenarios. Obviously, redacting names or any kind of sensitive situation, but providing teachers with real scenarios that took place in our building so that they can then say, okay, this is how I would have practiced in that situation, or this is how I would have intervened a little different than what was actually done. And it's kind of like a self-teaching moment for the teachers. They'll start to realize that, hey, maybe I could have approached that differently and it would not have escalated to an office referral. Um, Also, we're going to provide some behavior intervention training. With part of our Title I funds that we receive, we contract with ABC Behavior Counseling, and they have some board approved behavior counselors. I got to make sure I got that acronym right. They actually come in and they will provide training to the teachers as to how to intervene and to de-escalate situations. So unlike with the Evelyn Moon situation, they were going to provide the trauma-informed training. These professionals come in and provide just general behavior intervention. So if you see this particular type of behavior, this is a good and effective way of intervening there. We will also kind of increase our student and family engagement. Um, we have the idea as an administrative team, and I ran this by our principal, my fellow assistant principal. We decided to establish a student equity council. So what better way to know what the kids are thinking than to ask the kids what they're thinking? So we're going to get representation from our fifth and our sixth grade in our buildings. Those are the two highest grade levels that we serve, and it's also where the majority of our behavior comes into play. So we're going to pull a couple of students there. We're going to get a good even mix of demographics and students that are not commonly referred and students that are commonly referred to the office so that we can then start to get their feedback as to what's going on in the classroom. Is there something that's being done that could spike the discipline? Is there something that's being done to truly de-escalate, and kind of see it from the student lens? We're also going to invite more parents and more parental input for our ACIP process. We currently have two parents that are on board with our ACIP writing team. Um, and those parents are the two that are the president and vice president of our parent teacher organization. We really need more input than that because those are two parents that are super active in things and their kids typically don't get in trouble. So we're considering who to call and kind of attached to this process that would provide us more input in terms of is there something taking place in the building that's causing behaviors to spike? Because it certainly is a problem given our data that 75% of our referrals came from students that are of minority identity. Um, Last thing here with student and family engagement is to issue climate surveys, not twice, which is what is required by our district, but do it quarterly. So are we making progress towards improving the climate of the school and improving the culture of the school? And getting that feedback from parents and families is going to really help to kind of see, are the other things that we're doing really making a dent in what's going on? Obviously, with any kind of change, there's going to be some anticipated challenges and anticipated benefits. And even though numerically it looks a little different on this screen, the benefits truly are going to outweigh our challenges here. I do kind of expect that we're going to see some pushback from the teachers, especially once we start with some of our trainings, which is going to kind of bring out some biases that potentially could exist. Anytime that you make an accusation that somebody's biased, you're probably going to get a little pushback. So we really kind of anticipate that that's going to happen, which is why we're bringing in Evelyn Moon and that organization that can kind of help those teachers see that, and provide them with strategies to overcome those biases. Also, there's always a potential for inaccuracies within the data collection, especially since human hands are going to be touching that. Um, Anytime a human does something, they have a tendency to mess it up. So, just honest and upfront, there's a chance that we could have some inaccuracies within the data. We hope that it's not anything that's going to skew the data, but certainly inaccuracies could be there. We also, because we are in a school and school district that receives title funding, and we also happen to be a school that's hard to staff, we know and recognize that we're going to have a staff shortage, especially when it comes to compliance monitoring of all of the changes that we're making. The reality is that our administrative team is not going to be able to get into all 80 classrooms, to monitor every single thing that's taking place within the building. We're going to do our dead level best to do that. And we're making our classroom observations kind of a bit of that requirement. When we also do our Title I walkthroughs, we're going to add some things about climate and culture and de-escalation and see if the teachers are actually implementing the changes that are being advised. And we are also aware that we do have a cultural gap between our faculty and our students. As previously mentioned, 51% of our student population is of a minority identity. We currently only have, of a staff of 80 teachers, we only have 5 teachers who are a racial minority. So there's obviously a cultural gap there that needs to be fixed. So as we begin to do some hiring practices going forward, we're going to make sure that we are giving very, very careful consideration to candidates that are of minority ethnicities, to ensure that we're getting more of an alignment as to what our student population is. Excuse me. We're also, for the benefit side of things, we're going to be building a more just climate in the building, to where racial minorities are not feeling like they're being targeted. That if they get in trouble with the office, they're immediately going to get suspended. Um, because looking at the data, I could genuinely see why someone would potentially think that. We certainly did not intend that with the discipline practices that we used last year. We followed our code of conduct, but it could potentially just be an issue with classroom management It's sending kids down to the office because they're interpreting things incorrectly, which goes back into that cultural gap that we have. Um, we're also going to be improving relationships between all stakeholders. So we're talking an improved relationship between students and teachers and students, teachers and parents, um, even parents and students, really, in the grand scheme of things, because there's going to be less discipline referrals at home, which I know in my own case, if I got in trouble at home or trouble at school, I was certainly in trouble at home too. Um, so we're trying to improve those relationships as well. And it's going to also decrease what we're having to report into OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, which in public schools you have to do that annually, or at least our district does. We were recently underneath a desegregation order, um, which was lifted in the past couple of years, but we still have to report that data into OCR to ensure that we are not engaging in segregational practices. Um, and when you're reducing those numbers, there's that potential for recognition, which kind of comes into play with one of the strengths of my leadership when we took the Strengths Finders test was I'm a competitive person. Everything is a competition. So if there's a potential that we're going to get recognized, that is certainly something that we're going to factor in. Um, so the presentation that I just provided to you is something that we truly are going to implement at the school level. And I anticipate hearing some good feedback from you guys. And if you have questions or concerns, please reach out. Feel free to post here in the discussion board. And I hope that this will improve our culture at school. Thanks for listening.